There's a sound my refrigerator makes at 2 in the morning, a low hum like breathing. Most people would find that strange, comparing a kitchen appliance to something alive, but when you've slept alone for 6 years, you start to find comfort in the strangest places. That hum means I'm home. It means the milk is cold. The leftovers from dinner are wrapped in foil the way I like them. And no one is going to walk in and tell me it's time for my medication. I take my medication. I've been taking it since before some of these young doctors were born. I don't need a stranger in scrubs standing over me with a plastic cup like I'm a child who can't remember to swallow. I'm Cecily. I'm 91 years old and I live alone. And I want to tell you something that most people are afraid to say out loud. Staying in my own home is the single best thing I have ever done for my health. Not the hospital, not my daughter's guest room, not the facility with the hand railings and the lavender wallpaper and the Tuesday bingo nights. My home, the one with the squeaky third step and the kitchen window that sticks in the summer and the garden. Harold planted the year we moved in, back when our knees still worked and we thought 60 was ancient. Harold's been gone 6 years now, 6 years and 4 months ass if I'm honest, and I always am about him. He died in this house, in our bed with the quilt his mother made draped over his legs because he was always cold at the end, even in July. And after he passed, everyone, and I mean everyone, started talking about what to do with me, as if I were a piece of furniture that needed relocating. Mom, you can't stay here alone. That was Helen, my daughter. She means well. She always means well. But meaning well and understanding are two very different things. And I've spent the better part of my life learning to tell them apart. Helen came over the week after the funeral with a folder, a real folder with tabs. She'd printed out brochures for 3 different assisted living communities. That's what they call them now, communities, as if putting old people in a building together and giving them a shared television makes it a neighborhood. She sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I taught her to roll pie crust when she was 7, and she opened that folder like she was presenting a business proposal. "This one has a pool," she said. "This one has a garden club." I looked at her and I said, "Helen, I have a garden. I'm looking at it right now." She closed the folder, but she didn't throw it away. I found it in the drawer by the phone 2 weeks later. I understand the fear. I do. When you love someone who's old, you start seeing danger everywhere. The stairs become a threat. The bathtub becomes an enemy. Every time I don't answer the phone on the first ring, Helen's heart probably skips. I know that because I was the same way with my own mother. I remember calling her every Sunday and holding my breath until she picked up. And when she did, I'd pretend I was just calling to chat. But really, I was checking, making sure the voice on the other end still sounded like her. So, I don't blame Helen. I don't blame David or Paul either. My sons, both good men, both terrible at talking about feelings. David once suggested I move to a place where people can keep an eye on you. And I told him I didn't need eyes on me. I needed to be left alone with my own eyes, which still work fine. Thank you very much. But here's what I want to say, and I want to say it carefully, because I know not everyone has what I have. I know not every old woman has a house that's paid off, and a body that still mostly listens when she tells it to move. I know that. And if you're in a different situation, I'm not judging you. I'm only telling you what I know from my own bones, my own walls, my own mornings. Staying home saved me. Not in some dramatic way, not like a movie. It saved me the way water saves you, slowly, quietly, by being there every single day. After Harold died, I thought I would fall apart, and I did for a while. I burned toast for 3 months straight because I kept making enough for 2 and then standing at the counter, staring at the extra slice like it owed me something. I left his shoes by the door until David finally moved them, and I cried so hard that night I thought something in my chest had actually torn. But the house held me. The walls didn't ask me to get over it. The bedroom didn't suggest I try a support group. The kitchen just waited for me to come back to it. And eventually, I did. There's something about your own space that no one talks about when they talk about aging. They talk about safety. They talk about fall risks and medication management and emergency response times. And those things matter. I'm not a fool. But no one talks about what it means to awake in a room you've slept in for 40 years and know exactly where the light is without opening your eyes. No one talks about the way your body remembers a house, the exact number of steps from the bed to the bathroom, the height of the counter where you rest your hip while the kettle boils, the spot on the sofa where the cushion has molded to the shape of you because you've sat there 10,000 times. That's not sentimentality. That's survival. My body knows this house the way my lungs know air. Take me out of it. And I have to think about every single movement. And when you're 91, thinking about movement is what makes you fall. I tried it, I tried leaving. Helen finally wore me down about 2 years after Harold died. She convinced me to spend a month at her house. Just a trial, she said, just to see. She set up the guest room with new sheets and a little vase of flowers, and she moved the nightstand to the side she thought I'd prefer. And she put a nightlight in the hallway so I wouldn't trip. She did everything right, and I was miserable within a week. It wasn't Helen's fault. Her house is lovely. Richard keeps it in good shape. He's handy that way. Always fixing something. Always with a tool in his hand. And Sophie, my granddaughter, she was a light. She'd come home from school and sit on the edge of my bed and tell me about her day. And those were the best minutes I had. But the rest of it was slowly disappearing. I couldn't cook because Helen's kitchen wasn't set up for me, and she worried I'd leave the stove on, which I've never done in my life. But once you're past 80, everyone assumes your brain is made of Swiss cheese. I couldn't garden because their yard is all decorative stones and one sad little boxwood. I couldn't even watch my shows because the television was in the living room, and I felt like I was intruding every time I turned it on while Richard was reading. And then, and this is the part that really got to me, I overheard Helen on the phone. She didn't know I was in the hallway. She was talking to David, and she said, "She's fine, but it's a lot. The kids have to be quiet." And Richard's stressed, and I feel like I'm managing 2 households. She wasn't being cruel. She was being honest. And that honesty hit me harder than cruelty ever could because she was right. I was a lot, not because I was demanding. I barely asked for anything, but because my presence changed the rhythm of their home. I was a guest in my daughter's life, and no amount of fresh sheets and flower vases could change that. I came back to my house after 3 weeks. Helen drove me, and she was quiet the whole way. And when she helped me inside, she stood in the doorway and said, "I just don't want anything to happen to you." And I said, "Helen, things are going to happen to me. I'm 91. The question isn't whether something happens. It's whether I'm home when it does. I've thought a lot about what it means to take care of yourself when you're old, and I've realized that most of the world has it backwards. They think taking care of yourself means being taken care of, being watched, being monitored, being moved to a place where someone else controls the thermostat and the menu and the schedule. But that's not care. That's management. And I've spent enough years being managed by expectations, by marriage, by motherhood, by a world that thought women should sit down and be quiet. I am not going to spend my last years being managed by a system that thinks safety is the same thing as living. I spent a long time learning these things, the hard way. Decades of figuring out what it actually means to take care of yourself. Not the way doctors tell you, but the way your own life teaches you if you're paying attention. I put some of what I've learned together, the things I wish someone had handed me when I was first doing this alone. If any of that sounds like something you might need, I left it in the first comment below this video. It's there whenever you're ready for it. Let me tell you what my days look like now because I think people imagine something sad. They imagine me sitting in a dark room surrounded by dust, waiting to die. That's not my life. My life is this. I wake up around 6, sometimes earlier if the birds are being dramatic. I lie in bed for a few minutes and I listen to the house. I know what every sound means. The creak in the hallway is just the wood expanding. The tapping on the window is the branch from the old maple that I keep telling David to trim, and he keeps forgetting. I get up. I go to the bathroom slowly because mornings are when my hip is stiffest, and I've learned to respect that hip because it's the only one I've got that still works without a replacement. I make tea, not coffee. I gave that up at 85 when my doctor looked at me like I'd committed a crime. The tea is good, though. I drink it at the kitchen window and I look at the garden and I decide what needs doing. That deciding, that's the part people don't understand. Every day I decide. I decide whether to water the roses or let them wait. I decide whether to walk to the mailbox or ask the neighbor boy to bring it in. I decide what to eat, when to eat it, whether to eat at all, or just have toast and jam. Because some days toast and jam is a perfectly good dinner, and I don't care what anyone thinks about it. Those decisions are my life. They are the architecture of my independence. And every time someone suggests I move somewhere where those decisions are made for me, they're suggesting I stop living while my heart is still beating. I have a system. It's not perfect, but it's mine. Mondays, the grocery delivery comes. I order on the computer. And yes, I use a computer, and I'm quite good at it, actually, though I did accidentally order 47 bananas once, and the delivery boy thought I was running some kind of operation. Tuesdays, Helen calls. Wednesdays, I do laundry, which takes longer than it used to because I rest between loads, but it gets done. Thursdays, Margaret comes over. Margaret is 78, and she lives 2 streets away, and she's the only person in my life who doesn't treat me like I'm made of paper. We sit in the living room and we drink tea, and we talk about everything. Our husbands, our children, our bodies falling apart, the state of the world, the price of butter, which has become genuinely offensive. Margaret is why I'm still sane. Everyone needs a Margaret. Fridays are my quiet days. I read. I listen to the radio. Sometimes I just sit in Harold's chair. I still call it that. And I close my eyes and I let the house be still around me. People are terrified of stillness. They think it means loneliness. But loneliness is being in a room full of people who don't really see you. Stillness is being alone with someone who does yourself. Saturdays, one of the boys usually stops by. David brings me bread from that bakery I like, the one on Maple Street that uses real butter. And Paul calls from Oregon, where he moved 15 years ago for a job he doesn't even like anymore. But he stays because his wife loves the rain, which I find hard to believe, but people love strange things. And Sundays are for whatever I want. Sometimes that's church. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just me and a bowl of soup and a rerun of something I've already seen 3 times. And that is a perfect day. I fell once. I should tell you that because I know it's what everyone worries about. About a year ago, I was reaching for a bowl on the second shelf, a bowl I've reached for 1,000 times, and my foot slipped on the kitchen mat and I went down hard, hit my shoulder on the edge of the counter, lay on the floor for about 10 minutes, not because I was hurt badly, but because I was scared and angry at my body for betraying me, angry at the floor for being so hard. Angry at the bowl for being on the second shelf when I knew I should have moved it to the first shelf months ago. I got up. It took a while, and it wasn't graceful, but I got up. I pressed the button on the little tent Helen bought me, the one I swore I'd never wear, and then started wearing after Margaret's husband fell and lay on his bathroom floor for 4 hours before anyone found him. The pendant works. A nice woman answered and asked if I needed help, and I said, no. I just wanted someone to know I was on the floor, and now I'm not. She sounded confused, but she was kind about it. After that, I made changes. I moved the bowls. I got rid of the kitchen mat. I put a grab bar by the tub. David installed it, and he only drilled into the wrong wall once, which is good for David. I got one of those shower chairs, which I resisted for months because it made me feel old. And then I sat on it and thought, well, this is actually wonderful. Why did I wait so long? I bought new shoes with rubber soles. I started doing the exercises. The physical therapist showed me the ones for balance where you stand on one foot like a flamingo, and I do them in the kitchen while the kettle boils, and I look ridiculous and I don't care. That's what staying home is. It's not refusing to acknowledge that you're old. It's adapting your home to the person you are now instead of uprooting yourself to fit into someone else's idea of safety. I'd rather modify my kitchen than modify my entire life. If this is hitting close to home, check the pinned comment below. I left something there that I think might matter to you. Now, I want to talk about something that people find uncomfortable, and that's the loneliness question. Because whenever I tell someone I live alone, they get this look, this soft, pitying look, like I just told them my dog died. And I want to say, living alone is not the same as being lonely. I have been lonelier at a dinner table surrounded by family than I have ever been in my own living room at midnight. Loneliness isn't about the number of people around you. It's about whether any of them actually hear you. When Harold was alive, we had decades of silence between us that were the most comfortable silences I've ever known. We could sit in this room for an entire evening without saying a word. And it wasn't absence, it was presence. He'd read his paper, I'd do my crossword, and every now and then he'd look up and just nod like he was checking. Not checking on me, checking with me, making sure the world was still right. And I'd nod back. And it was. Now the silence is different. I won't lie about that. The first year after he died, the silence was so loud I thought I'd go mad. I started leaving the television on just for the sound of another human voice, and I'd fall asleep to the news and wake up to infomercials. And there's something deeply strange about waking at 3 o'clock in the morning to a man enthusiastically selling a blender. But slowly, and I mean slowly like seasons changing, the silence became mine again, not his absence, my presence. I learned to sit with myself and not be afraid of what I found. That's the thing about staying home. It forces you to meet yourself. There's no activity director planning your afternoon. There's no roommate making conversation. There's just you and your thoughts and your memories and your tea getting cold because you forgot about it again. And that can be terrifying. But it can also be the most honest thing you ever do. Because when there's no one to perform for, you find out who you actually are. And at 91, I can tell you I like who I found. I'm not saying I don't get lonely. I do. Especially in the evenings when the house gets that particular kind of quiet that only comes after sunset. When the street goes still and the only sound is the clock in the hallway that Harold wound every Sunday, and that I now wind on Sundays because the ritual is more important than the time it tells. Those evenings can be long. I won't pretend otherwise, but I've learned something that took me most of my life to understand. Loneliness is not an emergency. It's a feeling. And like every feeling I've ever had, and I've had all of them, trust me, it passes. You sit with it. You let it be heavy. And then you wake up the next morning and the birds are at it again, and the refrigerator is humming and the kettle is waiting, and there is another day to decide about. And that's enough. It has to be enough. I worry sometimes that I'm being selfish, that by staying here, I'm causing Helen and the boys more anxiety than if I just surrendered and moved somewhere supervised. And maybe I am. Maybe that's my last act of selfishness, choosing my own walls over their peace of mind. But I think, and this is the hardest part, I think they'll understand someday when they're old, when their knees go and their hands shake, and some well-meaning child of theirs starts printing out brochures. They'll stand in their own kitchen and they'll feel it. That pull, that deep bone-level refusal to leave the place where your life happened. And they'll think of me. And I hope they'll say, "Oh, that's what she meant." There's a photograph on my mantle of Harold and me on our wedding day. I was 23. He was 25. I was wearing my mother's dress, which didn't fit properly because my mother was built like a sparrow, and I was built like a woman who enjoyed bread, which I always have and always will. He was smiling, that sideways smile. He had the one that meant he was trying not to cry. We had no idea. We thought we knew what was coming, but we had absolutely no idea. We didn't know about the miscarriage in the 3rd year, or the fight that lasted 6 months in the 12th year, or the night I packed a suitcase and sat in the car in the driveway for 2 hours before coming back inside because I had nowhere to go and 3 children asleep upstairs. We didn't know about the good things either. The Sunday mornings when everything was right, the laughter in the kitchen, when David spilled flour everywhere and we all just stood there covered in white like ghosts. The night Harold danced with me in this very living room to no music at all, just because. All of that happened here in this house, between these walls. And when I sit in this room now, I can feel it. Not like a ghost story, like a warmth, like the house absorbed every moment and now it breathes them back to me. That's not something you can pack up and take with you. That's not something a facility can replicate, no matter how nice the common room is. I mentioned something earlier in the first comment below this video. If anything I've said feels familiar, it's there for you whenever you need it. My doctor, bless him, he's a good man, but he worries too much. He told me last year that isolated elderly people have higher rates of depression and cognitive decline. He said it like he was delivering a diagnosis. And I looked at him and I said, "Dr. Patterson, I am not isolated. I am selective." He laughed. Which is how I know he's a good doctor, because the bad ones don't laugh. But I understood his point. Isolations is real and it's dangerous. The difference is that staying in your home doesn't mean staying in your home alone forever with the curtains drawn. It means staying in your home and building a life around it that works. I have Helen on Tuesdays, Margaret on Thursdays, the grocery delivery on Mondays. The neighbor boy, James, he's 19, quiet. A little lost. He reminds me of Paul at that age. He mows my lawn and I pay him. And sometimes he stays for lemonade and tells me about his classes. And I listen because listening is the only thing I've gotten better at with age. Everything else has gotten worse. My eyesight, my joints, my patience for nonsense. But my listening has improved dramatically. My church group meets twice a month. My friend Di calls every Saturday morning at exactly 9:15, which is both comforting and slightly annoying because I haven't finished my tea by then. But consistency is its own kind of love. The point is, I am not alone. I am home. And those are different things. I built a web around myself slowly, one thread at a time, and it holds. Not perfectly. Some weeks the phone doesn't ring and the hours stretch, and I eat dinner at 4:30 because there's nothing left to wait for. But most weeks the web holds. A woman my age, my neighbor Ruth. She was 89. She moved to an assisted living place last spring. Her children insisted. She went willingly, or at least she said she did, which isn't the same thing. I visited her there once about a month after she moved in. The place was nice enough, clean, bright. There were flowers in the lobby and a woman playing piano in the common room and residents sitting in armchairs arranged in a semicircle like they were waiting for a performance. Ruth was in her room. She'd arranged a few photographs on the dresser and hung a small painting she'd brought from home, a watercolor of a coastline, something her husband had painted years ago. She showed me around like a hostess, opening drawers, pointing at the emergency cord by the bed. And then she sat down and she looked at me and she said, "Cecily, I don't know who I am here." That sentence has stayed with me. I think about it at least once a week. I don't know who I am here because Ruth was someone at home. She was the woman with the blue door and the rose bushes and the kitchen that always smelled like cinnamon because she baked every single Friday for 40 years. She was Mrs. Ruth Novak of 14 Birch Lane. She had a mailbox with her name on it. She had a porch where she sat and watched the seasons change. She had a life that was built into a place. And when they moved her out of that place, she didn't just leave a house, she left herself. Ruth passed away 4 months after she moved in. Now, I'm not saying the place killed her. I'm not dramatic and I don't believe in simple stories. She was 89 and she had a heart condition, and these things happen. But I will say this. The last time I saw her, her eyes were different, flatter, like someone had turned down the brightness. And I will carry that with me for whatever time I have left, because it confirmed something I already felt in my gut. That for some of us, home is not a building. It's a self, and leaving it is a kind of death that happens before the real one. I don't say this to frighten you. I say this because I think it's important to tell the truth, especially when the truth is inconvenient for the people making decisions about old women's lives. The truth is that safety is not the only thing that matters. Dignity matters. Autonomy matters. The right to burn your own toast at 2 a.m. because you couldn't sleep and you wanted something warm that matters. The right to leave your husband's jacket hanging in the closet for 6 years because you're not ready to move it. That matters. The right to sit in your own kitchen and cry if you need to without a caretaker knocking on the door to ask if you're okay, that matters. I have a sign on my refrigerator, not one of those cute magnets with a cat saying something clever. Just a piece of paper written in my own hand, taped there with Scotch tape that's starting to peel. It says, "This is your house. You are still here." I put it there after the fall, after the 10 minutes on the floor, because I needed to remind myself that getting up wasn't just a physical act. It was a declaration. I am still here in my house, in my life, making decisions, burning toast, watering roses, winding the clock on Sundays, living. The pinned comment below has something I put together for anyone walking this road. Take a look when you have a quiet moment. I know my body is not what it was. I know that one day, maybe soon, maybe not, I've stopped trying to predict. This house will become too much for me. The stairs will win. The garden will go untended. The kettle will sit on the stove, and I won't remember why I put it there. And when that day comes, I'll know. I'll feel it the way I've felt every major shift in my life. In my stomach first, then my chest, then my hands, which have always been the last part of me to give up on anything. But today is not that day. Today my hands made tea. Today my feet walked to the mailbox and back. Today I sat in Harold's chair and I read 3 chapters of a book I'll probably forget by Thursday. But that's all right, because reading it was the point, not remembering it. Today I decided what to eat and when to eat it and whether to answer the phone. I didn't. It was a telemarketer. They can rot. And those tiny ordinary decisions are the threads that hold me together. If you're out there and you're old and you're scared and everyone around you is telling you to leave your home, I'm not going to tell you to stay. That's your decision. And I respect it either way. But I am going to tell you this. Don't let anyone make you feel like staying is giving up. Stayings is the bravest thing I've done since I buried my husband and kept getting out of bed. Staying is me saying every single morning that I am still a person and not a problem. That my life is happening right now in this kitchen at this table with this tea that's getting cold again because I've been talking too long. And I always do that. Harold would have laughed at all this. He would have sat right there in that chair that still dips where his weight used to be. And he would have listened to this entire speech. And when I was done, he would have said, "Cecily, are you finished?" And I would have said, "Almost." And he would have gotten up and made me another cup of tea without saying a word, because that's how it was. That's how it was for 54 years. And this house remembers all of it. Every fight, every reconciliation, every morning, every night, every cup of tea made in love and silence. I'm staying. Not because I'm stubborn, though I am. Helen will confirm that in writing if you ask her. I'm staying because this is where I became myself. This is where I raised 3 human beings who are now raising their own. This is where I learned that strength isn't loud. It's daily. It's getting up. It's making the tea. It's deciding. And when they find me someday, whenever that is, I want to be here in my house, in my chair, with the refrigerator humming and the clock wound and the garden needing water, because a garden that needs water means someone was alive enough to plant it. That's all I have. That's everything. Thank you for sitting with me for a while. Not many people do that anymore. Just sit. It used to be the most ordinary thing in the world.